And if this sounds like the Islamists who we've been fighting, well, since the Yom Kippur War, really back in 1973, but certainly since 9/11, if this sounds a little bit like them, it should. They believe in different ideologies, but their means are absolutely the same. Do whatever it takes to win, because that's what God wants, because that's what humanity needs. So yeah, I'm not being morally relative, they're evil. If I'm good, if everything I believe in is good, if I believe in the Judeo-Christian Western tradition, if I believe in liberal democracy, if I believe in the value of the individual, if I'm right, they're wrong. And if they're right, I'm wrong. And we are not going to peacefully coexist. They will do whatever they can to win. So, what are the tensions within socialism, within communism? Well, are we internationalist or nationalist? Do we believe that the workers of the world should unite? They have nothing to lose but their chains, which is red communism, it's Soviet Russia, it's communist China to a degree, it's Cambodia. Or do we believe that the perfection can only happen within a national tradition? And that is the fascist tradition. Mussolini was a socialist before he invented fascism. And there's the Nazi Party in Germany. And people say, well, if you look at the continuum that you learn in civics class, you've got communism on the far left, from your perspective, and Nazism on the far right, and liberal democracy's baby bear's soft bed, nice right in the middle. But that is a nonsense continuum. The true continuum is anarchy on one side, totalitarianism on the other side, with liberal democracy in the middle. Too little government, too much government, we're right in the middle. And totalitarianism includes both fascists, Nazis, and communists. After all, what part of National Socialist German Workers' Party don't people understand? Hitler was a National Socialist. Socialism is interchangeable with many of the things I've said about communism. It is the idea that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. And as a Star Trek fan from way back, that's just like a dagger in my throat. That was the catchphrase from a Star Trek movie back in 1982 called The Wrath of Khan. And one of the heroes, Mr. Spock, said, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. That's communist! No, we don't believe that. We believe that the needs of the one. We are an individual society. Christ didn't come to save groups, he came to save individuals. So there's a tension. Are you a national socialist or an international socialist? Another tension is, are you revolutionary or evolutionary? Communists, as I've explained, are revolutionary socialists. They embrace violence. They embrace the dialectic. But the most successful socialists in the world are American progressives and European social democrats. Why? Well, when I was born was about the time they outlawed smoking in elevators. Can't smoke in an elevator. Pregnant woman might be there. She might get hurt, the baby might get hurt, so we get rid of smoking there. By the 70s, you have non-smoking sections on planes and restaurants, things like that. 1980s, you have smaller and smaller smoking sections. 1990s, my wife had to go out into the circle of shame in the middle of the Blue Cross Blue Shield parking lot to have a cigarette break because only those bad people would actually still smoke. And 10 years ago, for a high school Halloween thing, I dressed up as Fidel Castro, that evil person who literally harmed relatives of mine. I'm a quarter Cuban.
Trudeau?
What?
You dressed up as Trudeau?
No, Castro. I could dress up as Trudeau, though. But I don't like doing blackface. I think that would
And
be
he
a
wouldn't
mistake.
shave his beard.
Yeah. Excellent. And I had a cigar. And they're like, that's tobacco! Yeah? It's a cigar. Cigars are made of tobacco. You have tobacco in school! I can't believe it! The students were scandalized that I had an unlit stogie in school. Why? It's the boiled frog syndrome. Evolutionary socialism among American progressives and European social democrats happens over generations of time, but it works. Revolutionary socialism has never worked the same way. You actually change people's minds. You raise them to think a certain thing. So many people today are raised to believe that man-made climate change is real. Evolutionary socialists, like American progressives, how dare I call Democrats and progressive American socialists? Well, here's how. If you ask somebody to describe the utopian world of the future, whether you're talking to a communist, an anarcho-syndicalist, an American progressive, or a European social democrat, you will get the same description. The goal is identical. A material paradise, a heaven on earth, where people give according to their abilities and take only according to their needs, which is a Lenin quote. It's the same goal. And it is the annihilation of the society and the world that I presume you and I take part in and agree with. Here are the true fruits of communism. Hitler kills up to 20 people in his reign. Stalin kills between 30 and 60 million, combined with World War II and his purges and his man-made famines. Mao Zedong, the greatest murderer in human history, kills between 80 and 120 million Chinese. Now, that's much higher than the official figures, but the official figures are based on provable deaths. I'm basing my assumptions on anecdotal evidence that I have from Chinese friends who've escaped that place, and also my own read of what they did. In any case, Mao kills more than Stalin, who kills more than Hitler. The only people who are in their league in terms of a proportion of the human race that they kill is Genghis Khan, who actually wipes out over a quarter of the world's population, he and his Mongols. But the populations were smaller then. Let's look at one small Southeast Asian country, Cambodia. Cambodia starts out in 1975 as a nation of about 3.25 million people. The Khmer Rouge under Pol Pot take over in the spring of 1975. We pull out. 4 years later, the Vietnamese army invades because there's a conflict between the Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese communists. The Vietnamese save the Cambodian people. By that time, in 4 years, the Khmer Rouge have killed over 1 million people in a 3 million person country. They've killed over 1/3 of the population in 4 years because everyone was taken out of the cities and put in rural camps. The killing fields were places where if you had dental fillings, you were killed because you were a traitor. If you knew a foreign language, you were killed because you were a traitor. If you wore eyeglasses, you were killed because you were a traitor. What they wanted was year zero, an entirely new world that they will build from the ground up. And in Pol Pot's mind, that was an agrarian society. But communism gave his people the power to take Cambodia by the throat and kill and kill and kill until the Vietnamese bleeping communist army saved Cambodia from the Cambodian communists. You can't make this stuff up. So in conclusion, first of all, I appreciate you listening to me rant and rave. This is how I teach. I am being more blunt with you than I am with my students because we are adults who are here with common cause to preserve the best that is in Western civilization. Never, ever forget that when you are dealing with a true believing communist, you are not dealing with an individual who works according to personal morality. You're dealing with a person who believes in a millenarian evangelical religion that involves the utter destruction of everything we know, family, society, and its replacement with a top-down, designed, crystalline perfection. I wouldn't trust them if I were you. That's just my advice. Thank you for your attention and your indulgence.
You do actually have 10 minutes if you want to continue speaking, or do you have questions?
Well, I'll start with questions, and then we'll go. Yes, ma'am.
So I'd like to know, this has been very interesting. Is there a part 2?
Well, what I would have done...
40 minutes
You
is
could
a
roll
long...
the charter.
Well...
Yeah, I'm used to teaching in 50-minute blocks, and I also am used to having more than one day. Ultimately, if you look at section 4 on the second page, section 4b, I would have gone into more detail about the various ways that communists and socialists and national socialists have actually ruled.
Can you come back?
I would be happy to. You just have to invite me, and it has to be on a day where I'm not teaching at school. But I would love to. No, I love being here. I enjoyed being here the last time. By the way, the last time I was here, I was talking about bringing Western civilization as a high school graduation requirement for the state of Idaho. We got it to the point where last year it was debated a little bit, but Secretary of Education Critchfield killed it because she said that such change in a curriculum should come from the inside of the establishment. The establishment will never do this. Establishment public educators, which run the educational establishment, believe that Western civilization is evil, colonialist, imperialist, and needs to be destroyed. And there is no way on God's green earth they're going to do this. This is going to have to be imposed from the outside. Now, with all respect, Secretary Critchfield imposed, I think it was a home economics or a personal economics addition to the curriculum. She was willing to do that, but she was not willing to fight the fight of Western Civ. Senator Teeves tells me that he thinks that as time goes on, there'll be a better chance. And I will be there if such a chance happens. And at some point, I'm going to try to speak to the Idaho Republicans, the state party, to try to get them on board. Because the truth is, every problem that we have in our society today comes from, is related to the lack of historical education that people have. People are required to pass 1 year of U.S. history and a bit of civics and a bit of U.S. government, but studying the history or studying the culture in the United States without understanding the history of the Western that comes before it is like going into a Star Wars movie, the first Star Wars movie, and starting when everyone's arriving at the Death Star. You can't really understand the movie if you're coming in halfway through. You can't understand America without understanding the West, without understanding the Jews, Christians, Romans, Greeks, medieval people, the Renaissance, the Reformation. All of that leads into America. You can't understand us without understanding them. So, at some point that'll happen. Anyway, I just threw that in there.
You're a charter school. Can't you do that?
Oh, we do that.
Yeah.
We do
Yeah,
that.
right.
And I believe
Schools don't.
Kootenai Classical does its version of that. There are many private schools and charter schools that do that, and religious schools. But the public schools have most of our students, and they don't.
Right.
And that, I believe, needs to change. Until we get that, we're not going to get anything. Sir?
So, I'm a native to Korea.
Mhm.
Born and raised South Korea till I was 9. So what I experienced in South Korea, we had briefly a martial law after the assassination of Park Chung-hee. Park Chung-hee was assassinated by his own CIAs. And then his general took over without the vote of the people.
Now, this is not the most recent brief martial law. This was back in the 80s or so.
Yeah, early 80s, the
Yeah.
Gwanggyu massacre we call it.
Yeah.
We
Please
had
go
a
on.
martial law that lasted 10 years, up till 1988.
Mm-hmm.
The Olympics changed everything in Korea. So if you compare and contrast between Seoul, it used to be a third world country.
Mm-hmm.
After the 88 Olympics, it built up the economy. South Korea is in a better shape than Pyongyang, North Korea. When you look at Pyongyang,
Mm-hmm.
nobody could live in the city of Pyongyang. Only for special elites, if you are Kim Jong-un's special people, are allowed to live in the city. If you're not one of those people, he kicks you out of the city.
Well,
Sends you guys death camp.
Kim Jong-un also has people born 3 generations as slaves. If your grandfather or great-grandfather did something to irritate the Communist Party of North Korea, you and your descendants down to the 4th generation are going to be raised in gulags as slaves. There's a wonderful book, I think, called Escape from Camp 13 by a person who actually was born and lived that life and got out. Do you have anything else to say? Because you can speak to the details of life in communist Korea and the effects it has on South Korea better than I can.
Yeah, and look at North Korea. It actually became a communist country before China. North Korea became a communist in 1948. China did it in 1949.
That's right.
So what happened was that Kim Jong-un's grandfather, Kim Song-il,
Yeah.
he didn't like the Japanese occupying both South and North Korea. So he asked the Russians for help. South Korea didn't until they got U.S. involved in 1945. So it was the 38th parallel got divided.
Mm-hmm.
between North and South Korea.
And to this day, you don't hear the word, and I'm going to use profanity in a moment, you don't hear the word Americans. At least this was true up until Trump's visit, and I think it's been true since Trump's visit. The word is American bastards. It's one word. We are American bastards because we had the temerity to interfere with Kim Il-sung's invasion of South Korea back in 1950. If it wasn't for us round-eyed barbarians, if it wasn't for us American bastards, Kim Il-sung would have conquered the entire peninsula, is the story that they tell. They also tell all sorts of other things. Basically imagine pictures taken of the worst slums in the United States and that advertised to the people of North Korea as a typical American town. The propaganda is really outlandish, but understand, if that's all you know, that's what you're going to believe. Thank you, sir. I hope I did some justice to your experience.
And also, the best speaker we should bring in is Yumi Park. She compared Joe Biden's evil as North Korean dictator.
I believe I saw her on television, and she was right. She was right, because the goal was the same. Ma'am, and then sir.
I saw a communist speak one time, and a question was asked of him. It never worked anywhere else. What makes you think it's going to work now? His answer was, Americans' foundation is better place so that communism will work here. So I thought that was interesting.
That is, because, look, ultimately these are dreamers. Oh, they're dreamers. One of the most dangerous things in the world is a human being that has a sociopathic dream, because they can justify anything. Look, the Western Europeans are more communitarian than we are. The Eastern Europeans not so much, because they endured Soviet communism for 4 decades. But in France, in Britain, in Western Germany, in Italy, and the people of Western Europe are waking up, but there is this sense that they live in a post-historical world, that they have achieved the perfect socialism in their social democracy, that they don't need to spend money on the military. They're teenagers living in our house.
Yeah.
We've protected Western Europe since World War II, and rightly so. But like teenagers, they do not appreciate what their parents do for them. Without American nuclear protection, without American conventional protection, Russia would have rolled through Europe the way Hitler did. And it hasn't. And even now, there is a question. I am absolutely not for what Biden did in Ukraine. But it's also true that we can't countenance the Russians succeeding in taking over the entire country in Moldova, because they'll go after Poland and the Baltic states next. We can't countenance the Chinese taking over Taiwan. If we allow that, then our entire defense structure from India to South Korea and Japan goes to hell. We need to be able to plausibly protect our allies. That doesn't mean what Biden did in Ukraine, but it does mean stopping them, standing up to them, which I do believe in. Anyway, I'm babbling. Yes, sir.
So the picture that you've painted of the communist society has this internal energy that's very combative.
Oh yeah.
And defensive against anybody that doesn't like them. So how does this structure maintain itself when there's so much internal energy against whoever might look like an enemy? I mean, they must have enemies within their own little ranks. How do they control that kind of insistence on, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm going to kill you?
Allow me to explain evil by describing good. Under the Romans, the early Christians were draft-dodging, cannibalistic sex fiends, because early Christians were pacifists for the most part. Early Christians did Holy Communion, which means they ate human flesh and drank blood, according to the Romans, and early Christians had the kiss of peace. And for Romans to call somebody else sex fiends is, during the empire, it's just ludicrous. They had orgy rooms in their villas. But the Christians lived according to a different standard. Christ was the standard, not the world. And thousands of Christians were martyred under Diocletian and under other emperors because they would not live according to the state. All they had to do was sacrifice a pinch of incense to the god emperor, and all would be well. Jews didn't have to do it, but Christians did. And Christians wouldn't. And they died by the thousands. Why? Because we Christians are not supposed to live according to the dictates of the world. We're supposed to live according to the dictates of our faith. And to the extent the Amish and the Mennonites and the Jehovah's Witnesses and other people who stay away from the world have a tradition within Christianity, it comes from Christianity under Rome. Communists, in this sense, are the same way. Who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? I tell you, your commissar, I tell you that the world functions in a predator-prey relationship, capitalists over everyone else. I tell you that there is hope for this world. This hope is our way of thinking. It's the revolution. Who are you going to believe, me or your eyes? Human beings don't live in the physical world. We're not animals in that sense. We live in an artificial world of culture, of ideas. We will die for it, we will kill for it, we will live for these ideas. And so it matters very, very much the ideas that we let become our basis. Christianity, a religion of light. In many ways, Buddhism, a religion of neutrality and light. Judaism, a religion of light. Even Islam has elements of it. Communism, like Haitian voodoo, is one of these ideas that I don't see light in. I see basically a cultic darkness that says, join us, reject the world as the world has rejected you, and we will give you meaning, and we will give you purpose, and we will give you legacy that will last long beyond your transient life. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's what I got.
How do they keep each other in check?
Oh, terror. Absolutely terror, violence. Yeah, no, if you step out of line, look.
You go to the gulags.
Look at the light version that happened with Mayor Eric Adams of New York City. I'm not a fan, but he stepped out of line and criticized Biden's immigration policies, and 3 months later, he's indicted by Biden's Justice Department. He stepped out of line. So even among today's Democrat Party, they're not necessarily going to send the Red Guards to your door and riddle you with holes, but they'll punish you. If you're naughty, they'll punish you. So that fear does it too. Anyway, again, thank you for your time and all your support.
And we'd like to close every meeting by giving you this, and please read what's on the front up there.
Free government requires action.